So the 2003 Formula 1 season was pretty decent. It wasn't without its controversies, but it also had a modicum of entertainment as well. And none of it seemed artificially manufactured just for social media engagement. The pre-social media days, but then again, what if social media did exist in 2003, or 1990, or 1989, or 1994 for that matter? At the Brazilian Grand Prix that year, Giancarlo Fisichella had won the race. Then he hadn't won the race. Then he'd won the race again. All due to a mishap regarding the FIA's timing and the actual timing the teams used on their pit walls. Later that year, there was a big controversy surrounding Michelin tyres, as Ferrari had claimed that the Michelins had more sidewall flex than they probably should, which forced the French manufacturer to come up with some new tyres in a very short amount of time. But there was another big moment that year, a moment that was immediately compared to another moment in 2000, and also a moment from 1977. And that event is the 2003 British Grand Prix. This race was held on the old bridge layout of the circuit that was in use until the start of the 2010s. The cars started just after Woodcut Bend, and turn 1 in those days was the epic Copse Corner. The track would then wind its way round as it does today up to Stowe and Club, but then instead of going to the right in a flat out kink like it does today, the drivers would hit the brakes and go through a left-right chicane, then a short straight that leads up to the fast right-hander at Bridge and into the complex of Priory, Brooklands and Luffield, back to the start-finish line. Some love that layout, but I personally prefer the newer entry into Brooklands, but, you know, each to their own. Now, having been to Silverstone recently, I can tell you the track is still there. I mean, you could just see that from a Google Earth satellite view, but hey, I'm just flexing. The circuit owners have changed that section to access roads and stuff, and it's highly unlikely it'll ever be used again for racing, due to how tightly packed that little straight is. Which would have been cool for historic racing, I guess, but you can't have everything. That new hotel opposite the pit lane is epic, by the way. So leading up to this race, it was Michael Schumacher in the championship lead with 64 points, with Kimi Raikkonen in second with 56. The Michael's brother, Al Ralph, had 53 points, with Juan Pablo Montoya in fourth with 47. Rubens Barrichello in the other Ferrari was in fifth on 39. And while Michael had been fastest in the first qualifying session, it was Barrichello who put it on pole in the second qualifying session, over half a second ahead of his legendary teammate. Jarno Trulli was in second, just a tenth off the pace, but Raikkonen was 0.4 off the pole time. For the home heroes, Coulthard was the first of the UK drivers in 12th, Justin Wilson in 18th in his Minardi, and Jenson Button started from the back as he didn't set a time in Q2. At the start on a dry track and from second on the grid, it was Jarno that jumped into the lead ahead of Barrichello. But it wasn't just the Renault that got ahead. Barrichello was mugged by Raikkonen as well, while the Schumacher brothers couldn't quite make it through into Copse. Just behind, though, Alonso had jumped ahead of Montoya's Williams and D'Amato's Toyota in a start that we've come to expect from him 20 years on. Near the back, a plume of white smoke erupted from the two Jaguars, but they were able to continue, at least for now. And going into Stowe, Alonso had a sniff at Schumacher, but Alonso was partially forced onto the grass. But on lap 6, a bizarre thing I've only ever seen twice since. Coulthard's headrest became loose and flew off, meaning that Coulthard had to come in and get a new one fitted because, well, safety. The only other time I've seen a headrest fly off like that was when Magnussen stuffed his Renault into the wall at Radion, and also when Hamilton had to get his popped back into place at Baku. Alright, Hamilton's didn't fly off, but you know what I mean. But anyway, this brought out the safety car. When the race resumed, it was on lap 10 when Barrichello got a run out of Club Corner and managed to get Raikkonen into the Abbey chicane, which, as we've established, is now turn 1. But going into this chicane, Barrichello managed to get Raikkonen around the outside of that particular corner, the first left-hander of that little complex. But then on the very next lap, James Allen is going ballistic because he's just seen something that is just, well, we'll just call it bizarre. Oh my goodness me, you know, he said that a lot. Just like Hockenheim a couple of years ago, there's a lunatic on the track down the Hanger Straight. 160 miles an hour the cars are doing down there. Safety car out, of course. The drivers are, oh my word! David Coulthard attempting a pass there on Olivia Panis. Meanwhile, Brundle, in his typical style, what on earth are you doing? And it was such an odd occasion that everybody said the exact same thing. Hockenheim 2000, where a disgruntled ex-Mercedes employee, I think he'd actually been fired by Mercedes, tried to cross the track and actually did cross the track at a point of the circuit where the cars were getting up to, were doing, or were going beyond 200 miles an hour. This being the old Hockenheim layout that was basically an oval. The lunatic in question, James Allen's words not mine, was a man named Neil Horan, and this isn't the kid from The One Directions, by the way. He's an Irish Catholic priest who became ordained in 1973 and is from County Kerry, as well as being the second of 13 children. He trained at St Brendan's College in Killarney and then St Peter's College in Wexford, but would not find his fame, or infamy, whichever you want to call it, until 2003. Horan had run onto the track at the Hangar Straight after finding a hole in the security, just like the bloke at Hockenheim had done. While the Mercedes employee had also tried to get onto the grid, Horan had simply found an opportunity for his premeditated track invasion. He ran onto the track wearing a green waistcoat and hat, white shirt and orange kilt, so the colours of the Irish flag, and carried signs saying "Read the Bible" and "The Bible is right." Wilson's Minardi, D'Amato and Panis in the Toyotas, Coulthard in the McLaren, Furman, who is also Irish, in the Jordan, and one of the Jags all took avoiding action, which at those speeds must have been something else. As you can imagine, the safety car had to come out, and this caused carnage in the pit lane as what is now the national pits, so used by everything that isn't Formula 1 or MotoGP, was getting a bit cramped even by 2003. Everybody except the two Toyotas and Coulthard came in. Coulthard had no reason to, as he'd been serviced when his headrest came off while Toyota were trying to get up to the front. The faster cars started to carve their way to the front after those pit stops, with Trulli, Raikkonen and Barrichello making their way forwards, where they were before Horan's antics started. Now, if you remember watching the race, you'll also remember the absolute legend of a marshal chasing down Horan as these cars were coming down the Hangar Straight and tackling him to the ground and restraining him so he could be taken off the track and arrested by the local police. That man's name was Stephen Green. Now, I can't find a picture of Stephen Green, so this one will have to do. What a champion. Michael, meanwhile, was trying to get past Alonso, but couldn't. Up at the front, Barrichello was trying to get past Trulli, while D'Amato still led the Grand Prix from Panis, and this would be the closest Toyota would get to a 1-2 given all that money they spent. Barrichello would finally pass Trulli on lap 27 with Montoya not far behind, and both would pass Panis on lap 29 before D'Amato pitted on lap 30. Raikkonen would get into the lead after the second round of stops, but Barrichello put in an absolutely sensational drive to catch up to the Finn, pressure him into a mistake, and take the lead. Raikkonen would make another mistake to gift Montoya second place. Rubens would eventually win the eventful Grand Prix, and it is probably his best ever drive, given that he was out of form, way behind his teammate, and then proceeded to destroy him all weekend. Now, this isn't me being anti-Schumacher. Barrichello was a lot faster in the second qualifying session and won the race, while Michael could only muster fourth, some 25 seconds further back. Now, if this was, Perez or Albon on Max or Bottas on Lewis, it would be pure memes. Barrichello was showing the driver he could be. Now, we can argue until the cows come home over who got shafted where. But while Barrichello was getting all the media plaudits and celebrating a very popular win, and not for the first time, behind the scenes Mr. Mosley and Mr. Eccleston were not very happy at what had just happened at their home race. And this is where the parallels to 1977 come in, as it was a case of people being on the track when people shouldn't be on the track. But unlike in 2000 when the Mercedes employee made it across the circuit, in 1977 the marshals on the active track were doing the right thing. Now, I've told this story before, but here it is again, just in case you're not aware. At the 1977 South African Grand Prix, the shadow of Renzo Zorzi broke down on fire at the side of the main straight, with Kyalami having a completely different layout to how it is today. It was a very fast portion of the track, either way. Zorzi broke down, his car was on fire, and two marshals from the other side of the track ran across to put the fire out. One of those was a guy known only as Bill. The other was a 19-year-old called Frederik Jansen van Buren, who was carrying the fire extinguisher. Now, both of those marshals crossed the track without clearance and were acting outside of the protocols of a car fire. If there was a car fire, it had to be two people with extinguishers plus another two with extinguishers just in case. Bill managed to get across the track while Van Buren was missed by Hans Stuck by millimetres. Tom Price, which was the next car in behind, hit Van Buren at about 170 miles an hour, and the fire extinguisher hit Price in the head, killing him and also Van Buren instantly. Now, what happened next is because Tom Price was dead on impact, his foot was still flat to the floor, and he carried on to turn one, where he hit Jacques Lafitte's Ligier, and it was that stopped him from going into a wall at high speed. And I've actually told this story before, as I've said, and people have gone in the comments, oh, I've just watched the footage of this, it's absolutely horrendous. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I've watched a lot of fatal accidents for these videos, and they're all harrowing, but yeah, this is the one that you can't shake. So if you are going to go and watch it, consider this your warning. So you can imagine then that when it came to one of the big 4 Formula 1 events, that being Britain, Belgium, Monaco and Italy, this also being broadcast around the world to millions, this is something that needs to go well. The sport had been embarrassed suitably into change after Ratzenberger and Senna, and the sport under the Mosley era was all safety, safety, safety. And for some bloke to make it onto the track and cause that sort of disruption and not only risk the safety of not just himself, but the drivers and the giga chad of a marshal that stopped him, Mosley was seething. Max and Bernie were rumoured to have threatened to take the British Grand Prix off the calendar because of this gargantuan security mess-up, but the drivers and team bosses all came to the defence of the circuit, saying that the race was good despite the track invasion, all the drivers had fun, and that the track itself was fine. Bernie and Max were also highly critical of the track's facilities, particularly when it came to traffic and parking, and it could have been used as an excuse to demand upgrades, which finally came for 2011. Peter Samble was quoted at the time of the BBC's report on the race saying that if someone sets himself on fire in the middle of Paris, you don't blame the city of Paris. Bernie later guaranteed the sort of security, I guess, of the race until 2015, so long as the British Racing Drivers Club and the promoters could get the upgrades that they needed to get done. But that wasn't the end for Mr. Horan. In relation to the track invasion, he was charged and tried in Northampton, where he pleaded guilty to aggravated trespass and was sentenced to 2 months imprisonment. During the trial, he claimed that the open gate was a message from God, but the court ruled it was premeditated because he'd already turned up to the race with those signs. In 2004, he tried to get onto the racecourse at the Epsom Derby, but was stopped by police before he could get in front of the horses. It wasn't until after he was released without charge people realised he was the same guy from the previous year's British Grand Prix at Silverstone. Also in 2004, he tried to interfere with the marathon at the Athens Olympics, pushing the Brazilian leader of the race out of the way before being tackled and subdued by a spectator, before being arrested. The runner that was leading would eventually finish third, with the Brazilian Olympic authorities asking for the gold medal to be awarded based off precedents set at other games. The request was denied. And in possibly the creme de la creme of bad ideas, he went to the 2006 FIFA World Cup in Germany, where he was promptly arrested. The reason for his arrest was because he'd sent a letter to Angela Merkel and also to an Irish newspaper saying that he was going to dance a jig in front of the stadium in Berlin, where the final was being played between France and Italy, whilst carrying posters saying, and I quote here, God, I can't believe I'm saying this, Adolf Hitler was a good leader following the word of Christ. As well as saying that he was going to do the salute, because I'm not allowed to say the N-word on YouTube, before lighting a candle in Hitler's memory at the Gestapo headquarters. He spent 2 months in custody. In 2005, he was kicked out of the Catholic Church, and in 2007, he was given a court order known as an ASBO, banning him from any of the London boroughs that has the course of the London Marathon going through. But aside from all that, Barrichello was fantastic that day, and funnily enough, he won that race at Hockenheim in 2000 as well. It also has to be said here that Stephen Green, the marshal that tackled Horan to the ground, was later given the BARC Browning Medal for outstanding bravery, only the second recipient after David Purley received it 31 years before that. But anyway, this has been the story of the 2003 British Grand Prix. Do you remember watching that race on ITV at home or anywhere else in the world? Did you have the same reaction as Brundle and Allen? Leave your comments down in the designated comment zone underneath this video and share your memories. And while you're going down there to leave your little comment, why not like the video and subscribe if you're not already, so you never miss out on anything I do around here. Massive thanks to the folk at Patreon for the continued support, and if you want to help support me at a more personal level, you can help out by following the link in the description, and down there as well is links to Discord and my socials. Well, there's super thanks if you just want to do a one-off donation or whatever. So until next time, I've been Millward. Have a great day wherever you live in the world, and I'll see you all again soon for another video. Bye.